Look, there are lots of reasons why you might not be sleeping right. It might be stress from doom scrolling, which guys, do not do that before you go to bed. It might be your neighbor's party being just a little bit too loud, but your mattress should never be the reason why. Fans of the show know that Helix Sleep Mattress has been a long-time sponsor, and for a good reason. They offer affordable financing options, deliver the mattress right to your front door, there's free shipping in the United States, and can easily be rolled out of the box and set up by yourself. Helix also offers a 100-night sleep trial, so you have a full 3 months of testing your rest, or they'll pick it back up and you'll get a full refund. Plus, Helix mattresses have a 10-year warranty, so you have a decade's worth of good sleep ahead of you. After more than a year and a half with my Helix sleep mattress, the one thing I know I'm guaranteed every day is a good night's rest. My Helix mattress has remained firm and springy, and countless fans who have purchased a Helix mattress can confirm alongside me that the revised Helix sleep quiz ensures that you're getting the mattress that's a perfect fit for you and your unique sleep needs. So all you side or stomach sleepers can rest easy. Beyond that, if you check the link below or go to helixsleep.com/thecompletionist, you can receive up to $200 off your Helix mattress, in addition to 2 free pillows. That's helixsleep.com/thecompletionist to find a mattress that you will absolutely love. Thanks for watching and enjoy the show. The Kingdom Hearts series is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. To many, it's a super unique action RPG. To some, it's a charming little adventure about friendship that stars Disney and Final Fantasy characters together. To others, it's an overly complicated mess of lore spread across a dozen plot-critical side games. And in the best and the worst of ways, Kingdom Hearts 2 is the pinnacle of all those identities all at once. Hey everyone, and welcome back to an all-new episode of the Completionist New Game Plus, the show where I am recompleting the original 120 games I ever featured here on this channel. Now, I absolutely adore the Kingdom Hearts franchise, despite that I don't always understand it. It was probably a licensing nightmare, but developer Square Enix struck gold with their idea to merge Disney and Final Fantasy characters into a single action RPG. And to a huge fan of both franchises like myself, this is a match made in heaven. Now, I haven't played Kingdom Hearts 2 since I first completed it on the channel many years ago, and that was on the original PS2. Since then, this game has been re-released as a final mix version with a bunch of new content and quality of life updates with it. And while I haven't touched Kingdom Hearts 2 in a very long time, I have completed most of the other games that have been released since. And while those later series entries have their own twist on the fast-paced combat the series is known for, they all kind of iterated on their foundation laid right here in Kingdom Hearts 2. So today, I cannot wait to feel the power of friendship and recomplete Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. And this one absolutely is my favorite in the series. Got it memorized? Let's begin.
And the battle continues! This could turn it all around! This bout will determine who is the strongest once and for all!
When Kingdom Hearts 2 first came out in 2005, I was ecstatic. I loved the first game even though most of my friends weren't fans. And I vividly remember buying the game the moment it came out and playing it for 6 hours straight with my best friend Kyle. Those 6 hours ended up only being the rather drawn out tutorial with Roxas, but it was so much fun to jump back into the series that I honestly didn't even mind it. Additionally, like many fans out there, I hadn't played Chain of Memories for the Game Boy Advance before jumping in to Kingdom Hearts 2. Unfortunately though, Kingdom Hearts isn't a series where you can just skip a side game. A lot happens in Chain of Memories that sets up the plot of Kingdom Hearts 2. However, despite a large gap in my knowledge about the series and the lengthy tutorial as a character I didn't know, I still managed to stay invested in the game. And once I was able to play again as Sora, Donald, and Goofy, the game became exponentially more fun. The combat had a lot more depth than Kingdom Hearts 1. The basic actions of dealing combos and managing magic and resources through your command menu remained the same, but fighting waves of Heartless felt more kinetic and fluid, especially with the addition addition of the reaction command, which prompts a quick cinematic to deal a bit of additional damage and turn the tide of the battle. It was an addition that rewards the player for their attentiveness in battle without changing the pace like many other QuickTime event games would have been known to do. And if the spectacle of reaction commands wasn't enough, Sora got drive forms, which powered him up into a heartless killing machine. But more on that later on. And each partner had new abilities called limits, which were super flashy team-up moves. Kingdom Hearts 2 was a pretty quick sequel that came out only 2.5 years after the original, but the level of polish from just about every aspect was a huge step. Jump forward nearly a decade later to when I tackled the game for the Completionist, and it more than held up. The main campaign was certainly just as fun as I remembered it, but the extraneous objectives of Jiminy's Journal, like the mini-games, and the Gummy Ship, weren't that rewarding and bogged down the entire pacing, which resulted in me giving it my Completionist rating of finish it. Like I said earlier, that was all in the original PS2 version of the game, because this time around, I am playing the HD Final Mix version on the PlayStation 4. There was a whole heap of new content that came with this game. New weapons, new bosses, and balancing issues that the original lacked. And these updates added a lot to my Completionist checklist. First and foremost, I would need to beat the main story on the all-new Critical Mode, which was Final Mix's newest, hardest difficulty. Thankfully, Critical Mode is accessible at the very start, so like the crazy person I am, I jumped right in with the heat turned all the way up. There is also an additional late game fight against Roxas, but beyond that, the story hasn't changed much outside of some new cutscenes. After the main story, there are 3 major focal points for completion. Everything surrounding the Gummy Ship, filling in all of Jiminy's Journal, and then tackling the game's oodles, canoodles, and toaster strudels worth of secret boss fights. Oh, and of course, any necessary trophy cleanup. They gotta clean those trophies. Nothing about completing the game was gonna be easy, especially on Critical Mode. But even though Final Mix effectively doubled the completion criteria from the original, I wasn't scared at all. If anything, I was excited for the challenge that lay ahead. The first thing that spoke to me when I jumped back into Kingdom Hearts 2 was the music. I was hit with the wave of nostalgia from the first note of Dearly Beloved. Composer Yoko Shimomura perfectly set the tone of every world and battle in this game. When it was whimsical, we had Monochrome Dreams. When it was sinister, we had Vim and Vigor. And for me only, I have to celebrate. For those of you who remember, I originally was mad at Kingdom Hearts 2 for playing what may have been the worst rendition of He's a Pirate of all time. I am happy to confirm that they finally let He's a Pirate blast in its full glory. Like I said in the original video, the arrangement did not do the song justice, so to finally properly adventure through the Isle of Tortuga felt so good. But a few select tracks weren't the only thing to get retooled. The visuals received an upgrade too. The art direction of Kingdom Hearts 2 is rock solid even on the PlayStation 2, so it was awe-inspiring seeing these worlds in high definition 2 console generations later. Slashing through each of these worlds with Donald, Goofy, and the other varying partners was super nostalgic for me. My personal favorite party member has to be Auron in the Olympus Underworld. This is the first Final Fantasy character to actually join the adventure in your party, and it is in the Hercules world. I wish there were more of these crossovers rather than just relegating the Final Fantasy characters to all live in Hollow Bastion. Okay, so before we jump into the meat and potatoes of this game, let's talk about the plot. The story of Kingdom Hearts has become synonymous with outlandish. And for Kingdom Hearts 2, it was on the weaker end. Not a bad plot, but definitely wasn't the strongest showing for the series. Truth be told, the first one is still the strongest. The second one, hands down, is my absolute favorite. Kingdom Hearts 1 was a lot more focused. Sora goes on a journey to find his friends, Riku and Kairi, and along the way uses the power of the Keyblade to save the world from Ansem, Seeker of Darkness. As that story progresses, we learn how these 2 mysteries are intertwined. It's not perfect, but it is a contained story that works on its own. In Kingdom Hearts 2, Sora is back at it again at the Krispy Kreme on a quest to find Riku, but this time he has to fight Organization 13 led by Xemnas. These 2 plot threads did intersect by the end, but they didn't play off one another very well as they did in Kingdom Hearts 1. So for example, in the first game, worlds like Halloween Town and Atlantica brought thematic world building. They explored the idea of what a heart actually was or what it meant to be traveling between these worlds. In Kingdom Hearts 2, these same worlds effectively have nothing to do with the larger plot at hand and just followed along with the plot of their source material movies. Though at least Halloween Town is still pretty fun, Atlantica just became a rhythm game world. Under the Sea has a level of charm and nostalgia going for it. But then there are the original songs made just for the game. Look, I never want to hear the song Swim This Way or the words Finny Fun ever again in my life. It's kind of a mess and would take a long time to explain. So to give us a quick summary, let's talk to our resident Kingdom Hearts lore expert, and I say expert in quotes, Barry Kramer. Take it away, Barry.
No. Oh, make it stop.
Thanks, Barry. In short, Kingdom Hearts 2 lays the foundation for a lot of elements that play a major role in the current pantheon of games, known as the Dark Seeker Saga. Unfortunately, a lot of it isn't well explored until Birth by Sleep. Final Mix added about 20 new and extended cutscenes that provided a bit more context to the organization, but most of it felt superfluous. Was the added cutscene of Xemnas walking down the stairs for 3.5 minutes necessary? No, absolutely not. But regardless of the divisiveness of the plot of this entry, the gameplay here set the standard for the rest of the series. You can really feel that complexity in the combat with the all-new critical mode. In this difficulty mode, enemies deal double damage, and Sora gets significantly less health and magic. They balance it out a little by starting off Sora with more abilities and a slight increase in strength, but you really need to be on the top of your game and master the ins and out of combat to survive. Plus, Kingdom Hearts 2 introduced my favorite ability, the Drive Forms. Basically, with the help of his party members, Sora could enter powerful new forms with their own unique fighting styles and cool costumes. For example, in Valor form, Sora wields a second Keyblade and goes all out in melee combat, whereas in Wisdom form, he receives a massive boost to his magic abilities and skates around on ice kind of. And each of these forms have their own level up system that powers up Sora's base form and gives him new mobility options like double jumping and gliding. And as a cherry on top, they all look so badass. Even Anti-form, which is supposed to be a punishment for using these forms too frequently, it looks cool. You can't heal or really do anything, but it's still awesome. Now, the last major combat system to make its return is summons. Aside from Genie, summons were a whole new roster of characters to aid you in battle. Stitch proved to be the most helpful by providing HP and MP recovery, along with protection from some enemy projectiles. I generally relied on the other abilities and items first and foremost, but there were a few secret bosses that were made way easier with Experiment 626 by my side. Now, in spite of the lackluster plot, the pace of the main game is really well done. Instead of visiting one world and moving on, the game has us revisiting all of the main worlds again after the big showdown in Hollow Bastion. And this works really well because after learning about Xemnas and his evil machinations, most of the worlds have a new context for Organization 13's interference in each of their areas. The pace of the gameplay also feels very natural. Early bosses like Shan Yu from Mulan's Land of Dragons and Hostile Program from Tron's Space Paranoids have fairly simple attack patterns to learn. They aren't pushovers by any means, but they give you a lot of opportunities to learn their new movesets. In comparison, endgame bosses like members of Organization 13 hit harder and faster, so being able to pick up on their patterns is all the more important. And when playing through Final Mix, that learning curve felt very natural. Even the secret bosses never felt unfair because they taught players how to learn these fights. Before I officially ended Xemnas' schemes, I wanted to make sure that I did all of the post-game type stuff. When I say post-game, I don't mean what's after beating the game, but rather what's right before the very end of the game. First on this docket was everyone's favorite on-rails gummy ship. After obtaining all the blueprints in the game, which totaled 39 different ships, I had to complete all of the gummy ship missions with an S rank. Each gummy route has 6 missions, 3 standard and 3 EX missions. All have specific requirements like use a ship that has less than 20 HP. The 3 standard missions requires players to collect lots of medals, kill lots of enemies, and set a high score. All 3 missions effectively boil down to deal lots of damage on 3 separate occasions. Throughout each of those missions, there were special item drops that I had to be sure to collect as well. Now, none of this was hard by any means, but there was a lot of it. One trick that I found really helpful for most of these missions was to build what's referred to in the community as a donut ship. Essentially, just a big open square ship with a huge hole in the center to take advantage of the fact that most enemy ships target the center of your build. I gotta tell you, there was something really satisfying about watching all the enemies' lasers fly right right through the center and completely missed my hitboxes. After completing the gummy ship, I moved on to filling out Jiminy's journal. Now, this little book is what killed the momentum the first time around for me. To fill out this massive chronicle of a book, I had to open all the treasure chests in the game, meet all the key characters, defeat all of the heartless and nobody types in the game, craft all synthesis items, get a high score on every minigame, collect all puzzle pieces, use all limits, and collect every single Ansem report. About 80% of these requirements, however, were fulfilled by just making it through the story. So for the most part, revisiting levels to clean up any extraneous chests, it went pretty smoothly. Some of the character encounters were related to secret bosses like the data fights, so we'll get to those guys in a minute. Now, the two grindiest hurdles of the journal were the side quests, which includes the missions and side minigames, and completing the synthesis list. Grinding for synthesis materials is rough. It's always been rough, but it was aided by abilities I could equip to increase those drop rates. The hunt got fairly tedious, but I kept going strong, knowing that the powerful items I would get from synthesis, like Ultima Weapon, would be helpful in the secret boss fights to come. Most of the missions and minigames required me to beat the challenge within a certain time limit or have a high enough score. These minigames ranged everywhere from sliding on a honeypot in 100 Acre Wood to skateboarding in Agrabah and part-time jobs like in Twilight Town. The missions in Twilight Town were probably the most interesting because your items and abilities affected your performance. So for example, in Cargo Climb, it was a cakewalk to complete it once I removed all of my combo extenders. Now, the biggest addition made to the Final Mix journal was collecting all of the 144 puzzle pieces. 144 puzzle pieces in total scattered across every world, with a third of those requiring Sora's drive abilities like Glide. Once all of my mobility options were maxed out though, this was a piece of cake and even rewarded me with items like the rare document recipe, which allowed me to synthesize a luck ring to make the aforementioned material hunting easier. Overall, there was a lot to track down, but the journal made it pretty explicit. Just look at all these lucky emblems I got. And with all that grinding out of the way, it was time to tackle all of the battles. We had all the original old fights from the original game, like the Underworld Coliseum, which was just as fun as I remember it being. Each of the Underworld Coliseum Cups had their own challenges, like time limits and not using drive forms. The Hades Paradox Cup was the hardest of them all, essentially being a 50-round gauntlet using all the limitations and bosses from the other 7 tournaments. It also brought in a bunch of unique bosses that we didn't get to fight anywhere else, like Hercules, Yuffie, Cloud, Tifa, and Leon. And speaking of the cast from Final Fantasy, I loved fighting Sephiroth once again. This was the hardest fight in the original release of Kingdom Hearts 2. In comparison to the new secret boss fights they added in Final Mix, I'd call this one honest. By no means was it easy, but Sephiroth's fighting style is straightforward, making it easier to learn. It's also nice to have a bit of plot to give context to the fight, when in Kingdom Hearts 1, he just showed up to the Coliseum unannounced. This fight was probably the hardest fight from the original Kingdom Hearts 2, but the boss battle bonanza does not stop there. Final Mix added so many more bosses. The Mushroom 13, the Lingering Will, and of course, the Organization 13 replica data fights. Now, the Mushroom 13 fights are special encounters based off the members of Organization 13. The mushrooms don't attack in traditional ways, so I had to deal with gimmicks like rapid healing and depleting a hit counter within a time limit. Not too bad. Next up was Lingering Will, who was another super tough secret boss fight. This was Terra's armor from Birth by Sleep. And, well, if you don't know who this is, don't worry about it. All you have to know is that this is an incredibly hard fight. Some would even argue it's the toughest in the game. I was able to beat him quicker than I anticipated, but it wasn't easy by any means. He is significantly more aggressive than Sephiroth, and to make matters worse, he has moves that would disable your attacks and magic. Careful dodging and blocking is crucial to this battle. And the final challenge of the game is the data fights. 13 incredibly difficult battles against Organization 13. These were members that I hadn't seen in the main story, like Largzine and Zexion. I'm ruining these names, I'm really sorry. And souped up battles against bosses I'd already faced, like Zaldin and Zigbar. And most of the fights had a twist that made them even harder. Arluxia gives you an instant kill counter that you need to continually reset before it drops to 0. And Vexen can summon a data Sora to fight you. None of them were easy and required careful consideration of the abilities and items I brought into the battle. This was my biggest struggle by far. Aside from the items I got for beating each of these new bosses, I also received a crown to wear that went from bronze to silver to gold after beating the Mushroom 13, Lingering Will, and the data fights. And although it was a cute way to signify I was triumphant, I didn't even notice it until my chat pointed it out to me. And if I had to summarize these fights in one word, I would say rewarding. And any fan who's taken on these secret bosses can attest to just how hard these fights are. For a completionist, these challenges were exactly what I was missing from the original game, by providing a sense of purpose to all of the grinding I did for the rare loot. At the casual level, Kingdom Hearts has something of a reputation of being a brainless, mashing button kind of game. That is absolutely not the case in critical mode. At the highest level of play, I needed to learn the tells of each boss's attacks to keep up with them, and pick item and ability loadouts that best countered their fighting styles. There is so much more diversity applied to the combat system. A player can easily get lost tumbling down that rabbit hole. And although none of it was game-breaking by any means, I felt the differences that swapping out a few abilities made. And this depth to combat is what made Kingdom Hearts 2 so iconic to me. The mechanics in every installment following this one were inspired by the systems and pacing introduced right here in Kingdom Hearts 2. And yes, the plot isn't the strongest in the series, but it's also not bad by any means. The charming antics of Sora, Donald, and Goofy helped keep the game moving forward when Xemnas got a little too in his pedantic monologues. When I recompleted Kingdom Hearts 2.5 Final Mix, there were 82 hours of total playtime, 13 Organization Data Battles won, 13 Mushroom 13 bosses beaten, 144 puzzle pieces collected, 36 gummy missions all cleared at S rank, 29 missions and minigames beaten, 8 Underworld Coliseum Cups won, 59 items synthesized, and 3.5 minutes of Xemnas walking down the stairs. Of all the things to add to this game, were all of these stairs really necessary? Come on, man.
Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix is truly the fully realized version of the original. There is so much new content added that brought the completion experience to a whole new level. The secret boss fights never felt unfair because they gave me the tools I needed to overcome the challenge. If you want a game that nails down the highs and lows of a good post-game challenge, this game is an absolute must. And really, those highs are so damn high that they eclipse all of the lows with extreme ease. I'm looking forward to the future of the series. I'm very excited to see where these games will bring, especially with Kingdom Hearts 4 being recently announced. And although the spectacle is on a whole new level of fidelity, there was a sense of familiarity in Sora's combat that all started here in Kingdom Hearts 2. And as long as that foundation is here, I think I have to, and I think a lot of us will, have a lot to look forward to going forward. So, with that in mind, guys, I give Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix its new completionist rating of completed.
Complete it!